legends are never born by accident. They don't simply appear from thin air, nor are they mere stories told around a fire for entertainment. Behind every legend lies a hidden truth, buried deep beneath the earth, or in the depths of the ocean, a truth that once was reality. We believe that history is written in books by historians. But what if history itself is a secret, one we've been deliberately allowed to forget? The story of the Leviathan began long before the Bible. Yet it was there that it first echoed loudest. The Book of Job describes it as a creature before whom even the bravest heroes fall powerless. Who can open the doors of its mouth? Around its teeth lies terror. These words hardly sound like poetic exaggeration. They sound more like a warning. The descriptions are precise, too vivid, too detailed to be mere metaphor. In these passages, the Leviathan breathes, moves, and undeniably lives. The Bible never questions its existence. It states it plainly as fact. But if it is real, why does humanity stubbornly refuse to see the truth? Perhaps we fear admitting to ourselves that our world is not as we've been told. Medieval maps were more honest. They openly marked areas of the ocean with, "Here be dragons." Today, we simply label these as unexplored territories and conveniently forget them. It's easier to dismiss something as myth rather than acknowledge an unknown form of life lurking beneath us. Life we're unprepared to face. The Leviathan became a victim of censorship, of historical silence, an easy explanation designed to remove fear from the human heart, but not truth from the depths. Yet the reality is that the Leviathan's image was intentionally simplified, reduced to mythical proportions, transformed into mere fiction, to maintain a comfortable illusion in a world where humanity believes itself supreme. True descriptions of this creature survive only in scattered fragments, Sumerian clay tablets, ancient Chinese chronicles, myths from the indigenous people of the Pacific. All describe colossal underwater beings, serpent-like or dragon-like, with eyes piercing through darkness and bodies resilient to pressures that would crush any modern submarine like aluminum foil. These distant records, separated by time and geography, tell strikingly similar stories. They hint at a biological reality impossible to ignore. Yet even today, armed with technology and knowledge, we refuse to dive deeper where truth might dwell. Because truth is far more terrifying than legend. Oceans cover 71% of Earth's surface, yet we've explored less than 5% of their depths. We travel to Mars, send probes to the farthest reaches of our solar system, but avoid our own backyard. We fear confronting the answer to the ultimate question: what if the oceans don't belong to us? What if we are merely guests, allowed to live upon the surface? The Leviathan may not just be the great sea monster depicted in ancient engravings. It could represent an entire race of creatures older than humanity, wiser than whales, more adapted than giant squid, creatures that survived a catastrophe humanity only vaguely remembers through ancient religious tales. These accounts, inscriptions, maps, and biblical mentions aren't just legends. They are clues. Cracks in the wall separating us from reality. A reality that could change everything. Because if the Leviathan didn't die, if it still swims in the darkness at the edge of our known world, then we aren't the only masters of this planet. And perhaps this world never truly belonged to us. If that is true, what else might the depths be hiding from us? There are truths that modern science chooses not to acknowledge. Truths that disrupt the comforting illusion of a world fully understood and perfectly under control. One of these uncomfortable truths involves the Earth as it existed before the Great Flood. Across cultures, spanning the globe from the Sumerians to the Mayans, from the Norsemen to Pacific Islanders, legends persist of a cataclysmic flood, an event so powerful it erased civilizations and destroyed creatures that seemed immortal. We dismiss these accounts as myths or symbolic fables, but what if they contain more truth than we're prepared to admit? Imagine our planet with a fundamentally different atmosphere, not merely warmer or wetter, but denser, saturated with higher levels of oxygen and moisture. An atmosphere where life on an enormous scale wasn't just possible, it was natural. Towering trees hundreds of feet tall, leaves of extraordinary size, insects whose wingspans defy the laws of today's biology. Under such conditions, giant creatures, dinosaurs, immense mammals, even the legendary Nephilim, described in ancient texts as giants among men, were not anomalies. They were the norm. The Bible, among numerous ancient texts, references these colossal beings known as Nephilim, powerful, towering, often violent giants who wielded dominance over ordinary humans. But after the Great Flood, they vanished, not simply because the waters washed away their civilizations, but because the planet itself had changed. The atmosphere grew thinner, oxygen levels dropped, pressure decreased, and the climate became hostile. Most of these enormous creatures couldn't adapt. They died out, leaving only legends and enigmatic bones that archaeologists still struggle to explain. But did all of them perish? Was this catastrophe truly total for every form of life? Perhaps on land, but not underwater. The ocean doesn't change so readily. It offers stability, steady temperatures, and consistent pressures. Even as the surface transformed, deep ocean conditions remained relatively constant, offering a refuge that allowed the oldest and most resilient creatures to survive. Imagine what happened to those marine creatures when water became their last refuge. They retreated deeper into darkness, into colder waters, stable and unchanged, far below the chaos above. This brings us back to the Leviathan, a massive marine creature that endured through profound adaptation. What we perceived as extinction on land became a rebirth in the ocean's depths. Scientists speculate the Leviathan could resemble prehistoric marine reptiles like the mosasaur, an enormous predator dominating the seas of the Mesozoic era. Others suggest plesiosaurs, or even primitive whales from millions of years ago. Ancient descriptions of the Leviathan hint more toward a gigantic eel-like creature, or perhaps an immense cephalopod, soft-bodied, flexible, able to withstand pressures and darkness where no sunlight reaches. Ancient texts weren't mistaken. They simply described beings no longer seen on the surface, passing down memories of creatures from a world we no longer know. If this theory holds even a grain of truth, the Leviathan isn't a mythical monster. It's a living relic of a prehistoric Earth, hidden deep beneath us, in a realm we're still too afraid to explore. But where legends end, real mysteries begin. Where stories fall silent, eyewitness accounts start to speak. People who've glimpsed something extraordinary, expeditions that ventured deep into the abyss and encountered the unknown. Testimonies science chose not to hear. Because the ocean is not merely water, it's a gateway, hiding a world older than humanity itself. We pour billions into space programs, yet we hesitate to look downward. Beneath the horizon lies a world more terrifying than the stars above. The abyssal depths of our oceans, where the line between what is real and what is impossible begins to blur. It is there, in the silence below, that reality resists definition. In 2012, renowned filmmaker James Cameron completed a solo descent into the Mariana Trench, the deepest known point in the Earth's oceans. Officially, he reported only darkness and rare life forms. But in less public conversations and interviews, he hinted at something different. He described a presence, as if something down there, something immense, was watching him. Not a fish, not a squid, something bigger. This wasn't the first story of its kind. In 1985, a Soviet deep-sea vessel in the Pacific Ocean abruptly halted its descent at nearly 7,000 meters. The crew reported that their instruments detected a massive object nearby, comparable in size to a submarine. But this was no known submarine. It moved too quickly, too fluidly, changed direction like a living thing. All over the oceans, there are places known as dead zones, regions where marine life avoids traveling for reasons no biologist can fully explain. Something keeps them away, something so disturbing that creatures break their migration patterns and circle these areas by hundreds of kilometers. Deep-sea sonar frequently picks up moving shapes, casting shadows that stretch for tens of meters. These anomalies are labeled technical errors in reports, but seasoned sailors have another word for them: Leviathan. If these shadows aren't mistakes, if they are living beings, then what exactly is hiding at the bottom of the ocean? The most likely candidates are descendants or variations of prehistoric marine reptiles, mosasaurs perhaps, or immense cephalopods. These creatures would have to survive intense pressure and absolute darkness. They wouldn't need light. Their bodies might have evolved to emit their own bioluminescence or use vibrations and sound to hunt or communicate. They may be intelligent enough to avoid detection, to hide from us as deliberately as we avoid them. So maybe Leviathan isn't just one creature. Maybe it's a class of beings, a lineage of forgotten giants that never died out, just disappeared into a deeper world. And if they exist, if they still roam the darkness below, then what other truths might be waiting in the deep? Perhaps the answer lies in a sound that was never meant to be heard, a signal we still can't explain. In 1997, deep in the quiet expanse of the Pacific Ocean, hydrophones operated by NOAA recorded a signal that should not have existed. It was named simply bloop. The sound was extraordinarily powerful, far louder than whale songs or any known natural oceanic event. Scientists suggested it might have come from a living creature because the frequency resembled that of organic life. But there was a problem. The power behind the sound was immense. To produce such a vibration, the creature responsible would have to be larger than any form of life officially known to have ever existed on Earth. What makes it even more unsettling is this: the source of the bloop was traced to a point in the ocean remarkably close to the fictional coordinates of the sunken city of Relier, the place described by H.P. Lovecraft in his story, The Call of Cthulhu. Lovecraft wrote his tale long before oceanography could have revealed such locations. So how did he know? Did he see it in dreams? Or was something showing it to him? Lovecraft wasn't just imagining monsters. His stories were full of strange details, details that modern discoveries are only beginning to reflect. He wrote of deep-sea creatures that sleep beneath the waves for millennia, waiting for the moment to rise again. The Call of Cthulhu wasn't just horror fiction. It was a warning disguised as fantasy, a message about knowledge too dangerous for the conscious mind. Knowledge that may have reached him through dreams, or something far older that whispers through the unconscious. The bloop never repeated itself. Since 1997, other strange ocean sounds have been recorded, but none like it. It remains unexplained, a fact, a recorded event, and yet, despite all our instruments and data, it is ignored, labeled, filed, and forgotten. This raises a chilling question. Do writers, those who open doors through imagination, sometimes know more than our scientists? Can human consciousness, when freed from the rigid walls of logic, connect to something ancient, something buried, something waiting? If Leviathan is real, and if bloop was its voice, then Lovecraft may not have invented anything. He may have only remembered. A memory that predates civilization, a truth too vast to be accepted. We may have already heard the Leviathan, and instead of listening, we chose to call it fiction, because truth is heavier than we like to carry. But if the ocean speaks again, will we be ready to hear? The world is full of stories that people only tell in whispers, especially those who've seen things that don't fit the accepted shape of reality. These testimonies exist in the space between fact and taboo. They're silenced, dismissed, or ridiculed, but that doesn't make them any less real to those who witness them. In 1978, the crew of an American research vessel in the Atlantic recorded something extraordinary. Sonar detected an object nearly 40 meters long, moving rapidly at a depth of over 5,000 meters. Panic followed in military channels. Fighters were scrambled. Naval ships were dispatched. But then, the object vanished, as if it had simply slipped deeper, below the sonar range. Later, in 1989, Soviet sailors in the Barents Sea witnessed a colossal shadow surfacing near their submarine. It was at least 30 meters long. One officer wrote in his private journal. It moved like a living creature, like a marine reptile. We never spoke of it again. We were made to forget. Similar accounts have emerged from around the globe. In the Pacific, off the coast of Japan, fishermen reported something massive rising to the surface, parting the waves as if they were mist. Near Australia, a fishing boat lost power after a huge dark shape passed beneath them, releasing a strange low-frequency hum that left the crew with intense headaches. These reports never make the news. Their sources rarely speak publicly. When they do, they risk ridicule, reputational ruin, or worse. That's always been the pattern when humans encounter something that breaks the scientific narrative. They're labeled as delusional, mistaken, or liars. But can so many people, in different places, in different decades, all be imagining the same thing? all describing enormous marine creatures, resembling extinct reptiles that were never supposed to survive? If it's a coincidence, it's a flawless one. Perhaps the real reason these events are buried is far more strategic. Perhaps those who know the truth understand just how dangerous this knowledge could be. Because if Leviathan exists, if it still lives in the deep, then the world we think we know becomes a fragile illusion. It means we are not at the top of the food chain. We are not in control. And the abyss below us is not empty. Something sleeps down there, and it may not stay asleep forever. Before we ask what the Leviathan is, we should ask another, equally important question. Where does it come from? Where could a creature of such magnitude exist? Where does it live, sleep, hide? And is there any trace in this world that it may have left behind? The answer may not lie in biology, but in geometry. The ocean floor hides not only creatures, but structures, forms that challenge everything we know about geology. They're captured by sonar, seen by explorers, but not understood by science. Right angles, smooth terraces, massive platforms, symmetrical to the point of absurdity. The most well-known example is the Yonaguni underwater structure near Japan. At a depth of over 25 meters lies a monolith that resembles stairs, an amphitheater, or even a fortress. The mainstream explanation is erosion, but dives reveal something else. This is not just a rock. It is something formed in layers, horizontal lines, creating the impression of architectural intentionality. Some divers claim they saw carved symbols, worn by time, but unlike any natural cracks. In the Western Atlantic, underwater ruins near Cuba, discovered in 2001 by a Canadian-Cuban team using deep-sea scanning. What they saw was shocking. Massive blocks, paved roads, geometric patterns stretching for hundreds of meters. But how could such a thing exist at a depth of over 600 meters, where humanity has never built anything? The project was immediately frozen. The archives were sealed. Further expeditions were denied. In 2011, the world heard about the Baltic Sea anomaly. Deep underwater, an object resembling a massive disk, round, dark, nearly perfectly symmetrical. Some believed it was just a rock, but instruments refused to function near it. Signals dropped, electronics glitched, and the object's surface appeared scorched. Researchers said they felt like they were in someone else's territory, as if something was watching them through the depths. The official response: silence. Another question: are these structures truly human? Or are they the remnants of a civilization that came before us? A civilization where the Leviathan wasn't just a beast, but perhaps a guardian, or worse, a resident. In Polynesian legends, there are tales of those who came from the deep. They were not gods. They were teachers. They punished. They ruled the oceans, but vanished after humanity crossed certain boundaries. The old beliefs say, if you enter forbidden waters, you may awaken something that must not be disturbed. These places, eerily close to the actual coordinates of the structures we've just mentioned, some of them radioactive, others classified as dangerous without explanation. And if these sites aren't just the remains of lost cities, but the homes of beings that survived the flood, that outlived humanity, that outlasted climate change, then we're not dealing with a predator, but something deeper. A sentinel, a watcher from below. Perhaps the Leviathan is not merely a biological entity. Perhaps it's a function, part of a deep mechanism that decides what is allowed to live on the surface. And these megastructures, not ruins, but temples, or traps, or gates, and something behind those doors is still waiting. The most important question in this story isn't whether the Leviathan exists. The real question is, why is the truth being hidden from us? What is so terrifying, so destabilizing, that governments and scientific institutions alike choose silence over disclosure? What makes this subject so forbidden? The answer is both simple and deeply unsettling. We like to believe we are the pinnacle of nature, the masters of the earth. We've built civilizations, created technology, conquered sky and land. But if there are beings beneath the sea, older, more powerful, perhaps more intelligent than us, then the entire foundation of human dominance collapses. Who controls the truth controls the world. Eyewitnesses are silenced. Expeditions are shut down. Evidence vanishes from public archives. Why? Because if the truth escapes, people will never sleep peacefully again. Humanity will no longer feel secure at the top. Our borders, our systems, our politics, they all lose meaning if something beyond them still roams the deep. Knowledge is a dangerous weapon. Those in power have always known that. They're not protecting us from fairy tales. They're protecting the illusion. Because the moment that illusion breaks, everything changes. What happens if the Leviathan wakes? What if it chooses to rise? Maybe that's why we're being pushed toward the stars. Maybe that's why we're being told to look up, not down. Billions are spent on colonizing Mars, while the oceans here remain a mystery. Maybe someone knows what's really sleeping beneath us, and they're afraid we'll get too close. The Leviathan is more than a creature. It's a symbol of a truth too massive to control, of a world that came before ours, and one that might remain long after we're gone. We pretend it doesn't exist, but it does. It waits in the depths, and if it ever chooses to rise, we will finally understand that the true ruler of Earth has never walked on land.